Chosen ones, I need to speak to you plainly and without delay. What I'm about to share is urgent, and it is not meant for everyone. If you are not walking the divine path of God, if your spirit is uncomfortable with truth, this message will not sit right with you. But if you are truly chosen, truly called, something pulled you here today. This message reached you at the exact moment your soul needed it. Not early, not late. Perfect timing. I want you to understand this clearly. We are witnessing a spiritual replay of Genesis 6, where the corruption of human seeds provoked God's warning and judgment. What happened before the flood is echoing again, not just in flesh, but in minds, identities, and spirits. Stay with me until the end, because what I will reveal today will bring clarity to confusion you've been carrying quietly. It will calm your spirit, sharpen your discernment, and remind you why you've always felt different in this world. Before we continue, chosen ones, give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon, and share this message with other chosen ones so they don't walk blindly in these times. And comment 444 in the comments to declare that you are aligned with God's protection, His warning, and His divine order. Now take a breath. Settle your spirit. Let me speak to you as a wise voice sent to guide you through this moment.
Genesis 6 explained simply what really happened before the flood. Now listen to me carefully and let your spirit relax as I explain this, because many people speak about Genesis 6, but very few explain it with wisdom, balance, and truth. I don't want you afraid. I want you informed, grounded, and steady. Genesis 6 is not just an old story about anger and punishment. It is a revelation about boundaries, order, and what happens when God's design is violated. Before the flood, humanity had reached a point where corruption was no longer just about sin as we casually describe it today. It went deeper. It reached the very seed of mankind. The intention God had for human life, identity, and spiritual alignment was being tampered with. The Bible tells us that the sons of God saw the daughters of men and took them. This passage has confused many for generations. Some ran too far with fear. Others dismissed it completely. Wisdom sits in the middle. What mattered most to God was that the natural order He established was being violated. Human beings were no longer walking within the design He created. Boundaries between the divine and the human were being crossed in rebellion, not obedience. Understand this. God is not threatened by humanity. He is protective of humanity. The flood was not rage without reason. It was a reset to preserve what could still be saved. God looked across the earth and saw that the thoughts of man's heart had become continually corrupted. Not occasionally, continually. That means corruption had become normal, accepted, celebrated. That is always the sign that judgment is near. Not when sin exists, but when sin becomes identity. Yet even in that darkness, God preserved a remnant. Noah, one man, one family, one bloodline that remained aligned with God's design. This is important for you to hear. God always preserves a remnant. Always. No matter how corrupted the world becomes, He never wipes out what is pure. He protects it. The ark was not just a boat. It was a boundary. It was separation. It was obedience in action. While the world laughed, mocked, and ignored the warnings, Noah listened. He didn't argue with God. He didn't negotiate. He obeyed. And that obedience became protection. Now let me slow this down for you, because this is where the therapy comes in. Many chosen ones today feel overwhelmed when they hear about Genesis 6. They feel fear. They feel heaviness. But that is not what this story is meant to produce in you. Genesis 6 is not about terror. It is about discernment. It is about understanding that when God warns, He is also offering shelter. The corruption before the flood was not just external, it was internal. Minds were altered, morals were twisted, truth was blurred. Sound familiar? People no longer knew who they were, why they existed, or who God truly was. Creation itself groaned under the weight of disorder. God is a God of order, not control. Order. Order brings peace. Disorder brings anxiety, confusion, and violence. That is why chosen ones today often feel mentally exhausted without knowing why. Your spirit recognizes disorder even when your mind can't explain it yet. Before the flood, humanity stopped listening. They trusted their own wisdom above God's instruction. They merged what was never meant to be merged. They crossed lines God clearly set. And once those lines were crossed, corruption multiplied rapidly. This is important. Corruption never moves slowly once boundaries fall. It accelerates. But hear this gently. God did not abandon humanity, He intervened. Judgment in the Bible is often misunderstood. Judgment is not always destruction. Sometimes it is divine interruption. God steps in when humanity is about to lose itself completely. That is why Genesis 6 matters today. Not because history repeats itself exactly, but because patterns repeat. Human nature repeats. Rebellion repeats. And so does God's mercy. Chosen one, you need to understand something deeply. You are not here by accident. Just like Noah was born in a corrupted generation, you were born in one too. That does not mean you are doomed. It means you are assigned. God did not preserve Noah because he was perfect. He preserved him because he was willing. Willing to listen, willing to obey, willing to stay different. That is why you've always felt different. That is why certain things never sat right with you. That is why your spirit resists what the world celebrates. You carry the awareness of divine order within you. Genesis 6 is not meant to scare you. It is meant to remind you that God sees corruption long before humanity does. And when God warns, it is because He is already preparing protection for those who listen. Take a breath here. Let your shoulders relax. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are awake in a time where many are asleep. And just like before the flood, God is once again speaking quietly to those who still know how to listen. Now that you understand what really happened in Genesis 6, without fear, without exaggeration, without confusion, we can move forward. Because what happened then did not stay there. The form changed, the methods changed, but the intention behind corruption remains the same. And that is what we need to talk about next. Let me take you one layer deeper, because this is where many people miss the heart of Genesis 6. The greatest danger was not the strange events themselves. The greatest danger was that humanity lost reverence. They lost the fear of God, which is not terror, but respect for divine order. Once that reverence disappears, anything feels permissible. Before the flood, people no longer asked, "Is this aligned with God?" They asked, "Does this benefit me?" And the moment self becomes the highest authority, corruption is guaranteed. That mindset alters generations. It shapes children. It rewrites what feels normal. And God, seeing far beyond one lifetime, intervened for the sake of future humanity. This is why chosen ones often carry a deep inner seriousness about life. Even when you try to be carefree, your spirit remembers that choices echo beyond the moment. You sense consequences before others do. That is not anxiety. That is discernment. God's warning in Genesis 6 was not loud thunder. It was patient instruction given over time. Noah preached righteousness for years while building the ark. People had time to change. They simply didn't want to. That is another pattern that repeats. God always gives time. Humanity often wastes it. And yet, notice this. When the flood came, the ark was already built. Protection was already prepared. God never warns without also providing a way through. This is where I want your heart to rest. God does not reveal truth to chosen ones to burden them. He reveals truth to position them. Awareness is not meant to exhaust you. It is meant to anchor you. So when you hear Genesis 6, don't think doom. Think discernment. Don't think fear. Think preparation. Don't think isolation. Think preservation. Because just as God preserved a remnant then, He is doing the same now. And you, chosen one, are part of that preserved line. The corruption of human seeds today, modern echoes of ancient deception. Now that you understand what truly happened in Genesis 6, let me gently guide you into the present moment. Because what we are witnessing today is not a carbon copy of the past, but it is a reflection. The form has changed, but the spirit behind it is familiar. And your spirit already knows this, even if your mind has struggled to put words to it. Corruption today does not always arrive looking dark or evil. That is the difference. In ancient times, rebellion was more visible. Today, it is subtle. It disguises itself as progress, freedom, intelligence, and self-expression. But beneath the surface, the same objective remains: to distort God's design and separate humanity from its creator. When I say corruption of human seeds today, I am not speaking only of flesh. I am speaking of identity, consciousness, values, and divine alignment. Seeds are not just physical. Seeds are thoughts, beliefs, patterns. When the seed is corrupted, the fruit will be too, no matter how beautiful it looks on the outside. Chosen one, look around you calmly, not fearfully. You are living in a time where truth is constantly redefined, where natural order is questioned, where confusion is encouraged, where people are taught to disconnect from God and call it enlightenment. That is not accidental. That is strategic. The greatest deception is not making people believe in evil. It is making people believe they no longer need God. In Genesis 6, boundaries were crossed. Today, boundaries are erased. Moral boundaries, spiritual boundaries, identity boundaries. And when there are no boundaries, there is no protection. Anything can enter the mind, the heart, the spirit. This is why so many people feel mentally exhausted, anxious, and empty, even while claiming to be free. Freedom without order becomes chaos, and chaos always produces suffering. You see it everywhere. People struggling to know who they are. People reshaping themselves endlessly, hoping peace will finally come. People consuming information non-stop, but starving for wisdom. This is not coincidence. This is what happens when the human seed is planted in soil that rejects God. Let me speak plainly to you as a shepherd would. Modern corruption does not force itself. It seduces. It whispers, "Did God really say?" The same question asked in the garden is being asked again, just dressed differently. Did God really define truth? Did God really create order? Did God really set limits? And once doubt enters, everything else follows. Technology, science, and advancement are not evil. God is not against knowledge, but knowledge without reverence becomes dangerous. When humanity begins to see itself as creator rather than creation, corruption accelerates. This is exactly what happened before the flood. Human wisdom rose above divine instruction, and here is where chosen ones feel the tension deeply. You live in the same world as everyone else, but you don't move the same way. Your spirit resists certain ideas instinctively. You feel uneasy with trends that others celebrate. You sense that something is off, even when you can't immediately explain why. That is not judgment. That is discernment. Many of you have tried to silence that inner voice. You told yourself you were overthinking, too sensitive, too serious. But the truth is, your spirit recognizes patterns that your mind is still catching up to. You are wired to notice corruption early because your role is preservation. Corruption today also targets intimacy, family, and legacy. Anything God designed to carry blessing is attacked. Marriage is mocked. Parenthood is devalued. Commitment is replaced with convenience. These are not random cultural shifts. They weaken the transmission of godly seeds from one generation to the next. In Genesis 6, God intervened because future generations were at risk. Today, the same battle exists. Not with swords or floods, but with influence, with screens, with narratives, with constant noise. Chosen one, pause here. Take a slow breath. You are not crazy for feeling overwhelmed by the world. You are not weak for feeling tired. Your spirit is reacting to an environment that is spiritually loud and mentally invasive. Corruption today does not shout, it hums constantly, and that constant hum drains the soul. Another sign of modern corruption is the glorification of self above all else. Everything becomes about personal desire, personal truth, personal comfort. But God never designed humanity to live disconnected from Him or each other. When self becomes God, loneliness follows. That is why, despite more connection than ever, people feel more isolated than ever. And yet, notice this: chosen ones are not drawn to isolation. You crave depth, meaning, truth. You want conversations that heal, not entertain. You want purpose, not applause. That desire comes from God. It is not weakness, it is calling. The corruption of human seeds today also attacks patience and stillness. Everything must be fast, immediate, instant. But spiritual growth requires time. Discernment requires quiet. And silence is dangerous to a system built on distraction. This is why many chosen ones feel guilt when they slow down, rest, or withdraw. But rest is not rebellion. Rest is restoration. God often speaks when the noise stops. Before the flood, humanity drowned in its own noise. Today, the flood is information, opinions, stimulation, and many people are spiritually drowning without realizing it. But here is the comfort I want you to hold on to. Just like in Noah's time, God is not surprised. He is not panicking. He is not absent. He is watching carefully. And He is speaking clearly to those who are willing to listen. You are not here to fight corruption with anger. You are here to resist it with alignment, with clarity, with obedience. Your very existence as a grounded, God-centered soul disrupts deception more than arguments ever could. That is why you often feel pressure to compromise, pressure to blend in, pressure to soften truth. Corruption always tries to neutralize what it cannot destroy. But hear me clearly now. If God preserved Noah in a world that had completely lost its way, He can preserve you too. The same God who shut the door of the ark is still protecting His chosen ones today. The method looks different, but the promise is the same. You are not meant to fear the times you are living in. You are meant to understand them. Awareness is your shield. Discernment is your compass. Obedience is your safety. And this is why the pressure you feel is not random. It is confirmation that you are positioned correctly. Now that you see how ancient corruption echoes in modern deception, we need to talk about something deeply personal. Because this battle does not stay outside of you. It touches your emotions, your relationships, and your inner world. And that is why, next, we must address why chosen ones feel targeted, isolated, and spiritually pressed like never before. Why the chosen ones feel targeted, isolated, and spiritually pressured. Now let me speak directly to the quiet struggle you rarely put into words. This is where I want you to breathe a little deeper, because what I'm about to say is not meant to alarm you. It is meant to comfort you, validate you, and steady your mind. If you have ever felt targeted without knowing why, isolated even in rooms full of people, or spiritually pressured in ways you cannot fully explain, I want you to hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken, you are not weak, and you are not imagining it. Pressure follows purpose. Chosen ones experience pressure because your spirit carries something that does not blend easily with a corrupted environment. Light does not need to announce itself to be noticed. Its presence alone exposes what prefers to remain hidden, and exposure always creates resistance. This is why many of you have felt misunderstood your entire lives. Even as children, you sensed things others ignored. You asked questions others avoided. You felt emotions deeply. You noticed hypocrisy. You picked up on tension in rooms before words were spoken. That sensitivity was not fragility. It was perception. But perception comes with weight. Living in a world that constantly moves against your spiritual nature creates internal tension. You are asked to normalize what your spirit rejects. You are encouraged to celebrate what your conscience questions. Over time, that creates exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but soul fatigue. This is why many chosen ones feel tired even when they rest. Your spirit is constantly filtering noise, deception, and distortion. You are processing on a deeper level than most people, and that takes energy. Isolation is another wound many of you carry quietly. You may have relationships, friends, family, but still feel alone, not because you lack people, but because you lack resonance. Few people speak your language. Few people understand your silence. Few people are willing to sit with truth instead of distractions. This isolation is painful, but it is also protective. God often separates before he elevates, not to punish, but to preserve. In seasons of separation, God refines discernment. He removes dependence on external validation. He teaches you to hear his voice without interference. Yet I know this truth does not always remove the ache. There are moments when you wonder why connection feels so difficult, why you seem to outgrow people quickly, why certain conversations feel shallow, why you crave depth while others crave noise. That does not make you arrogant, it makes you aligned. Spiritual pressure also manifests as inner battles, doubt, self-questioning, emotional heaviness without a clear cause. You may wake up some days feeling burdened without knowing why. This is because spiritual environments affect the soul just as weather affects the body. Before the flood, the atmosphere itself was corrupted. Today, the atmosphere is heavy with confusion, fear, comparison, and constant stimulation. Chosen ones absorb this more intensely because you are spiritually porous. You feel what others numb themselves to. That is why many of you have gone through seasons of withdrawal. You needed silence. You needed space. You needed to disconnect, not because you were depressed, but because your soul was overloaded. Let me say something important here. Withdrawal is not always weakness. Sometimes it is wisdom. Jesus himself withdrew often, not because he was overwhelmed, but because intimacy with God required separation from noise. Chosen ones must learn this rhythm or risk burning out. Feeling targeted is another experience many of you share. You may notice that conflict finds you even when you avoid it, that your intentions are misunderstood, that people project onto you, that you attract both admiration and resentment without trying. This happens because your presence activates people's unresolved inner worlds. Those aligned with truth feel drawn to you. Those resisting truth feel irritated by you. And often, neither understands why. This can be emotionally confusing. You may question yourself. You may try to soften, shrink, or silence yourself to avoid friction. But shrinking does not bring peace. It only brings self-betrayal. Chosen ones are often tempted to dim their light to survive. But dimming your light only increases inner conflict. Peace comes from alignment, not approval. Let me slow this down and speak to your heart. The pressure you feel is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are resisting compromise. Corruption presses hardest on those it cannot convert. If you were fully aligned with the world, there would be no resistance. The enemy does not waste energy on what already belongs to him. That realization alone should shift how you interpret your struggles. Spiritual pressure also increases as you grow. The more aware you become, the more responsibility you carry. Awareness is a burden before it becomes a blessing. First you see, then you grieve. Then you learn how to stand. Many chosen ones are currently in the grieving phase. You see what others don't. You mourn the loss of innocence. You mourn truth being twisted. You mourn relationships that cannot follow you where God is leading. Grief is part of awakening. Do not rush through it. Do not judge yourself for it. And hear this gently. God is not asking you to carry the weight of the world. He is asking you to stay faithful within it. You are not called to fix everything. You are called to remain aligned. Pressure does not mean urgency. Urgency creates anxiety. Alignment creates peace. This is why grounding practices matter for chosen ones. Prayer, stillness, scripture, silence. These are not religious obligations, they are spiritual hygiene. Just as the body needs rest, the soul needs recalibration. You cannot live continuously exposed to corruption without tending to your inner world. Chosen one, If you feel weary, it does not mean you are weak. It means you have been standing longer than most. If you feel lonely, it does not mean you are unloved. It means you are being refined. If you feel pressure, it does not mean danger is near. It means purpose is present. And this is where I want your heart to settle. God sees the pressure you carry. He sees the battles you fight silently. He sees the restraint you practice when others indulge. He sees the obedience that goes unnoticed. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are being prepared. Now that you understand why the pressure exists, why isolation has purpose, and why your experience is different, it is time to hear the warning that comes with love. Because awareness without guidance can still lead to exhaustion. Next, we must talk about God's warning to the chosen ones and how to stay protected, grounded, and spiritually intact in the midst of all this. Let me also address something many chosen ones struggle with but rarely admit. You often feel responsible for others. You sense when someone is drifting, hurting, or lost, and you carry that weight silently. That burden did not come from ego, it came from compassion, but compassion without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Before the flood, humanity ignored warnings because they were consumed with themselves. Chosen ones today often make the opposite mistake. You carry too much concern for others while neglecting your own spiritual maintenance. And God never asked you to bleed yourself dry for people who refuse to listen. Discernment means knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Not every truth needs to be spoken in every season. Jesus himself did not answer every question. Silence can be obedience too. Another source of pressure comes from your awareness of time. You sense that things are accelerating, that moments matter more, that choices carry weight. This awareness can create anxiety if not anchored in trust. But God did not reveal timing to burden you. He revealed it so you would live intentionally. You are not called to rush. You are called to remain rooted. Let me say this plainly. Corruption thrives on urgency and panic. God operates in clarity and peace. If something is pushing you into fear, confusion, or haste, pause. God's guidance may challenge you, but it will never fracture your peace. This is where spiritual maturity grows. Learning to remain calm while discerning chaos. Learning to stay gentle while standing firm. Learning to trust God's pace, not the world's pressure. So if you feel stretched right now, don't interpret that as danger. Interpret it as expansion. Growth stretches before it strengthens. And remember this, chosen one. Pressure does not define you. Your response does. You are not here to be crushed by the times. You are here to remain unshaken within them. Now, with this understanding settled in your spirit, we are ready to hear God's warning, not as fear, but as loving instruction meant to keep you whole. God's warning to the chosen ones. Stay pure, stay awake, stay separated. Now listen to me slowly and carefully, because this is the heart of the message. This is not a warning spoken in anger. This is not fear-based. This is a father's warning. Calm, clear, protective. When God warns his chosen ones, it is never to frighten them. It is to preserve them. And the warning for this generation is simple in words, but deep in responsibility. Stay pure, stay awake, and stay separated. Purity is not about perfection. Let me remove that burden right now. God is not asking you to be flawless. He is asking you to be aligned. Purity means guarding what enters you, what you watch, what you consume, what you entertain in your mind. Corruption rarely begins with actions. It begins with permission. Before the flood, humanity did not fall overnight. They tolerated small compromises. They normalized what once felt wrong, and over time, discernment dulled. That is always how corruption works. It does not rush you, it wears you down. Chosen one, you must understand this. Everything you allow into your spirit plants a seed. Conversations plant seeds. Music plants seeds. Images plant seeds. Repeated exposure shapes belief. This is why God warns you to be careful, not because he is restrictive, but because he understands formation. Staying awake does not mean living in suspicion, it means living in awareness. Spiritual sleep is dangerous because it dulls discernment. When people are asleep spiritually, they absorb narratives without questioning them. They adopt values without examining them. They drift without realizing it. Staying awake means you regularly ask yourself, is this drawing me closer to God or pulling me away? Is this feeding my spirit or numbing it? Is this producing peace or confusion? Awareness is not exhausting when it is paired with trust. It only becomes heavy when you feel responsible for everything. You are responsible for alignment, not outcomes. Separation is the most misunderstood part of God's warning. God is not calling you to isolate yourself physically from the world. He is calling you to be spiritually distinct. You can walk among people without absorbing their values. Jesus ate with sinners, but never adopted their ways. Separation means you do not compromise truth to belong. You do not dilute conviction to be accepted. You do not silence discernment to maintain comfort. This is difficult, especially for chosen ones who crave harmony. You often prefer peace over conflict, but peace that requires self-betrayal is not peace. It is avoidance. Let me speak gently but firmly here. Some relationships will require distance. Some environments will require exit. Some habits will require discipline, not because they are obviously evil, but because they subtly erode alignment. God often removes chosen ones from environments, not because those environments are sinful, but because they are distracting. Before the flood, people were busy, eating, drinking, marrying, living. None of those things are wrong, but they were consumed by the ordinary while ignoring the eternal. Distraction became destruction. Chosen one, if God is nudging you to step back from something, listen. Obedience often feels like loss before it feels like protection. Another part of God's warning is about guarding your identity. The world will try to define you by labels, productivity, appearance, or trauma. God defines you by calling. If you allow the world to name you, it will also claim you. Identity confusion is one of the strongest tools of corruption. That is why you must return to God regularly, not just in crisis, but in consistency. Identity is reinforced through repetition. What you rehearse becomes what you believe. Prayer is not begging, it is alignment. Scripture is not information, it is calibration. Silence is not emptiness, it is space for God to speak. God's warning also includes rest. Yes, rest. Chosen ones often ignore this part because you feel urgency. But urgency without rest leads to burnout. Even God rested. Not because he was tired, but because rest is part of order. Rest reminds you that outcomes do not depend solely on you. If you do not rest intentionally, exhaustion will force you to stop. And forced rest is never gentle. Let me say this plainly. Overexposure to corruption without restoration leads to numbness. That is why God calls you into quiet places, not to escape responsibility, but to renew clarity. God's warning is not that darkness is winning. Darkness never wins. God's warning is that compromise is costly, and chosen ones cannot afford to be careless. But hear this clearly now. God would not warn you if he had not already equipped you. Awareness is evidence of protection. Discernment is evidence of calling. Conviction is evidence of relationship. You are not being warned because you are weak. You are being warned because you are trusted. So do not receive this warning with fear. Receive it with gratitude. A warning means you are being watched over. It means God is invested in your future. Stay pure, not rigid. Stay awake, not anxious. Stay separated, not isolated. And if you stumble, do not hide. Return. God's mercy is not fragile. Now that you understand the warning, the instruction, and the heart behind it, we must talk about something empowering. Because you are not just being protected, you are being positioned. Next, we will talk about your divine role in this generation and why you were born for this exact moment. Let me also speak to the danger of subtle compromise, because this is where many chosen ones stumble without realizing it. Compromise rarely announces itself as rebellion. It often appears as fatigue, as loneliness, as the desire to feel understood or accepted. And in those moments of emotional vulnerability, the enemy offers comfort without alignment. This is why emotional awareness is spiritual protection. When you feel drained, discouraged, or unseen, that is not the time to make major decisions. That is the time to pause, pray, and rest. Many spiritual missteps happen not because of defiance, but because of exhaustion. A tired soul is more likely to tolerate what an alert spirit would reject. God's warning also includes being careful with who you allow access to your inner world. Not everyone who speaks kindly carries wisdom. Not everyone who listens understands. Some people are assigned to distract, not destroy, and distraction can be just as damaging over time. Guarding your heart does not mean hardening it. It means discerning who earns proximity. Jesus loved everyone, but he trusted only a few with his inner life. That pattern still applies. Another part of staying awake is recognizing spiritual imitation. Corruption often mimics truth closely enough to confuse those who are not grounded. This is why God emphasizes relationship over information. You can know many things about God and still miss his voice. Intimacy sharpens discernment more than knowledge ever will. If something sounds spiritual but produces fear, pride, or superiority, examine it. God's truth produces humility, peace, and clarity. Conviction may sting, but it heals. Condemnation only wounds. Let me also correct a common misunderstanding. Separation does not mean disengagement from society. You are not called to hide. You are called to stand differently. Your integrity in everyday life is part of your witness. How you speak, how you treat others, how you respond under pressure. Chosen ones are often watched more closely than they realize, not because they are famous, but because authenticity draws attention. People may not listen to your words, but they observe your consistency. And finally, remember this. God's warning is not an announcement of disaster. It is an invitation to alignment. Warnings are evidence of care. Silence would be far more dangerous. If God is speaking to you now, it is because he intends to walk with you through what is coming. He does not warn from a distance. He warns from closeness. So receive this warning not as a weight, but as a covering, not as restriction, but as guidance, not as fear, but as favor, because those who listen to God's warnings are not caught off guard. They are carried through. The divine role of the chosen ones in this generation. Now let me lift your eyes for a moment, because everything we have spoken about so far was preparation for this understanding. God does not warn without purpose. He does not preserve without intention. And he does not awaken chosen ones simply so they can observe the times. You are here because you have a role. You were not born into this generation by chance. Many of you have wondered why life feels heavier for you than it seems for others, why you carry a sense of responsibility you never asked for, why you feel called to depth while the world prefers distraction. That feeling did not come from trauma or imagination. It came from assignment. In every generation where corruption increases, God positions stabilizers, people who carry clarity, people who hold the line, people who anchor truth quietly while chaos grows louder. You are not here to dominate the world. You are here to preserve what still can be preserved. Before the flood, Noah was not popular. He was not influential by the world's standards. He did not change the culture. He obeyed God, and that obedience saved the future. That is a powerful lesson for chosen ones today. Your role is not to convince everyone. It is not to argue endlessly. It is not to exhaust yourself trying to wake people who refuse to open their eyes. Your role is to remain aligned so that when others seek refuge, truth still exists somewhere stable. You are a living reference point. In a world that keeps shifting definitions, chosen ones carry consistency. When truth becomes flexible, you remain grounded. When values are negotiable, you remain rooted. That steadiness matters more than you realize. Many of you underestimate the impact of your presence. You think influence requires platforms, numbers, or recognition. But spiritual influence works differently. Sometimes your quiet refusal to compromise plants a seed in someone watching silently. Sometimes your peace under pressure becomes permission for someone else to seek God. You may never see the full reach of your obedience, and that is by design. God often hides outcomes so that motives remain pure. Another part of your role is restraint. That may sound strange, but hear me. The world celebrates expression without wisdom. God values restraint guided by discernment, knowing when not to speak, when not to engage, when to walk away. This kind of maturity frustrates corruption because it cannot provoke you easily. Chosen ones who master restraint become immovable. You are also carriers of spiritual memory. While the world forgets God, you remember. While others rewrite truth, you recall what was always established. That memory keeps the spiritual door open for generations to come. This is why chosen ones often feel older than their age. You carry weight beyond your years. You sense history repeating itself. You recognize patterns others dismiss. That does not make you pessimistic. It makes you perceptive. Your role also involves intercession, even when you don't label it that way. When you pause before reacting, when you pray quietly, when you choose patience over retaliation. Those moments matter. They shift atmospheres in ways you may never fully comprehend. Before the flood, violence filled the earth. Violence begins internally before it becomes external. Chosen ones resist violence at its root by choosing peace, self-control, and humility. That resistance slows corruption. This is why your inner life matters so much. The greatest battlefield for chosen ones is not external. It is internal. Your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions. The enemy knows that if he can destabilize you internally, your external impact diminishes. That is why God emphasizes inner alignment over external success. A calm, grounded, chosen one is far more dangerous to corruption than an angry one. You are also here to model what a relationship with God looks like without performance. Not loud religion, not forced holiness, but steady faith, consistent character, quiet obedience. People are tired of noise. They are hungry for authenticity, and chosen ones carry that authenticity naturally when they stay aligned. Let me address something many of you struggle with. You often feel like you're not doing enough, that you should be more productive, more vocal, more impactful. That pressure does not come from God. God measures faithfulness, not visibility. Noah's assignment was not complicated. Build, trust, obey, wait. Your assignment may look ordinary on the surface. Work, care, pray, rest. But obedience in ordinary spaces carries extraordinary weight. God places chosen ones strategically, in families, in workplaces, in communities, often in unglamorous positions. Because corruption does not only exist in obvious places, it hides in systems, habits, and norms. You are salt. Salt works quietly. It preserves. It prevents decay. You do not need to announce it. Your presence is enough. And let me say this with authority and comfort. You are protected because you are needed. That does not mean nothing painful will touch you. It means nothing will destroy what God intends to use. Protection does not always look like avoidance. Sometimes it looks like endurance. God trusts you with endurance because He has strengthened you for it. Finally, understand this. Your role is not permanent struggle. There will be seasons of rest, seasons of clarity, seasons of joy. God does not keep His chosen ones in constant tension. He leads them beside still waters too. But for now, your awareness, Your discipline and your alignment matter deeply. So do not minimize your role. Do not envy louder voices. Do not rush your process. And do not abandon your grounding practices. You are not here to escape the times. You are here to stand faithfully within them. And now, with this understanding settled, it is time to close this message gently, firmly, and with reassurance. Because God did not bring you this far to leave you uncertain. Let me speak to you one last time, heart to heart, as we conclude. Let me also remind you of something important, because many chosen ones forget this when the journey feels long. You are not carrying this role alone. God never assigns purpose without provision. Even when you feel unseen by people, you are fully seen by heaven. There are moments when obedience feels unrewarded, when doing the right thing seems to cost more than it gives, when compromise looks easier. In those moments, remember this: God measures differently. What looks small in the natural often carries eternal weight in the spiritual. You are not delayed. You are being rooted. Deep roots take time, and deep roots are what allow trees to stand when storms arrive. Shallow growth may look impressive at first, but it cannot endure pressure. God is more interested in your stability than your speed. Also know this: you are not behind schedule. God's timing is not threatened by the world's acceleration. He moves with intention, not panic. When the time is right, what He has prepared in you will surface naturally. So stay faithful in the unseen moments. Stay aligned when no one is watching. Stay gentle without becoming passive. Stay firm without becoming hardened. Your role is unfolding exactly as it should. Now let us bring this message to a close with clarity, peace, and renewed strength, so you can carry this understanding forward without fear. Conclusion: a final warning, comfort, and call to alignment. Chosen one, take a slow breath with me right now. Let everything you've heard settle gently into your spirit. This message was not meant to overwhelm you. It was meant to steady you. You were led here because God wanted to remind you of who you are, where you stand, and why your awareness matters in this generation. We are living in serious times, yes, but seriousness does not mean hopelessness. God has never left Himself without witnesses, without remnant, without chosen ones who carry clarity when the world drifts into confusion. You are part of that preservation, not by force, not by fear, but by alignment. Remember this above all else: God's warnings are not signs of abandonment, they are signs of closeness. He warns those He walks with. He instructs those He intends to protect. If your spirit resonated with this message, it is because you are being covered, not condemned. You do not need to panic. You do not need to rush. You do not need to fight the world. Your assignment is simpler and deeper than that. Stay grounded. Stay obedient. Stay discerning. Stay connected to God's voice above all others. And when the noise grows louder, return to stillness. When pressure increases, return to prayer. When confusion spreads, return to truth. You were never meant to carry this season alone. Before you go, chosen ones, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon, and share this message with other chosen ones who need clarity and peace right now. And comment 444 in the comments as a declaration that you are aligned with God's protection, His warning, and His divine order. Walk gently, stand firmly, and remember, God is not finished with you. You are exactly where you need to be.